there's pool, there's swimming, there's rock climbing. We went last week. Jonathan, Kate, and I, and Jeremy went, and they got zip lining now. So maybe we'll do some zip lining. I'm a little nervous though about you guys zip lining. Well, people get hurt zip lining. But it's going to be an awesome opportunity to grow closer to Jesus, and like I said earlier, grow closer with each other. Now, here's the thing, guys, with summer camp, we already have about 20 people signed up already, right? So we're only taking about 70, 75 or so. So if you are a 6th grader or a 7th grader and you really want to go to summer camp, which I hope you do, you better go home today and sign up. The way you can sign up is go to rockypeak.org, our website. If you go to the top right section, there's a little tab. You click on that tab, you'll see a middle school section. You click on middle school, you'll see a bunch of middle schoolers on that page that are all in high school now, so we need to update it. And if you go all the way down, you'll see summer camp. You can register there. All right. So the price for summer camp is $300. It'll get you a bus out there. It'll get you food for all the time. Please don't bring your own food, guys. All right. There's like an ant problem I heard last year in Kate's cabin because someone brought food. We don't talk about that. All right. We don't talk about that, or we're going to get. All right. So hope you guys can go to summer camp. Again, grab a summer calendar. There's so many other events. For example, we're running out SMG, so you can go and see me again. So you want to go to those events. All right. So anyway, we're going into this time of teaching. So go ahead and let's go ahead and pray. All right. So Jesus, thank you so much for an opportunity for all of us, 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, to come together for one central purpose, and that purpose is you. Now, so many of us in this room, Jesus, may not understand fully what you are all about. We might hear of who you are, maybe on TikTok, on social media, maybe at school. But Jesus, my prayer right now is that all of us in this room would just get a glimpse, just a little bit of the bigger picture of what you have called for us. Understanding who we are, our identity is in you, not anything else we see, not on Instagram, not on social media, not at school, not what other people tell us who we are. But our identity, who we are, is truly rooted in you. So I ask this morning, Lord, that you would just show us more of that truth as we continue this series. So it's in your name, we all said, amen. So Wildlife, like I said, we are continuing this series called Who Am I? We started this series just a few weeks ago, and in this series, we're asking the question simply, who am I? And in this series, we've been looking at truly how we can understand better of who we are, because we've been looking at God's Word, the Bible, to have a better understanding of who we are. Because we live in a time in history where so many people are telling us who we are. Whether someone's labeling us, whether we're labeling ourselves, so many people are telling us who we are. So the point of this series is that we are going on a journey to discover who God says that we are. And if you guys were here last week, you remember that we learned that we are sinners saved by grace. But if you weren't here, I'll catch you up a little bit, that last week we learned that God's grace should motivate us to be more like Jesus. And this morning we're going to learn what it means to be a citizen of heaven. A citizen of heaven. So if you guys have your Bibles, which if you didn't, this week we actually have Bibles in front of you that you can borrow one of ours. All I ask you is that you don't steal it, you don't set it on fire, you don't rip it up, but you feel free to borrow one of those. But we're going to be in the book of 1 Peter. And that's in the second half of our Bibles, known as the New Testament. We're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 2. So if you ever have a hard time finding a certain verse or a chapter in the Bible, what I usually do is I will grab my Bible and I will just open up in the middle, and you'll find Psalm. Hey, I did it. And then Psalm is really about the middle-ish of the Bible. And then if you just keep turning to the right till you see a bunch of books that say Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, then you're in the New Testament. And then just keep going, you'll eventually see 1 Peter, right? So, 1 Peter chapter 2, and we're going to be starting at verse 9. But as you guys turn there, I want to give you a little, what we call backstory, to help us understand what this is all about. Because again, we've in this series, we've been kind of jumping around the entire Bible, understanding who we are. Because the Bible is full of powerful truth of who God says that we are. So, this book is written by a guy named Peter. That's why it's called 1 Peter. Now, right, it's boom, mind blown. Now, Peter, you guys might recognize, Peter is the guy that was one of Jesus's closest friends. One of the guys that, like, maybe you have a friend in your group that will, like, maybe never, like, shut up. Peter was that guy. Don't look at each other. Don't start pointing. As soon as I said that, someone went, just like immediately. I'm not looking at names, but this guy, Peter, was the guy, if you know, he was the guy that denied Jesus 3 times. He was the one that walked on water to go out to Jesus on that lake and then fell in because he took his eyes off of Jesus. He's the guy that cut off a dude's ear. Crazy. He cut off a dude's ear because he was trying to defend Jesus. But if you don't know that story, Peter was most likely trying to aim for the guy's head. So Peter doesn't have good aim. But this is the same Peter. And what Peter is doing is that he is writing to a group of believers of Jesus living in an area called Asia Minor. And he's writing to them because these people are faced with intense amounts of persecution for their faith in Jesus. Now, if you don't know what persecution is that it's really crazy. Persecution is pretty much like someone is trying to attack you because you believe in Jesus. And all throughout the New Testament, a lot of people were standing up for their faith in Jesus, and other people were like, "Nah, I'm not about that. I don't like that." So other people were trying to take them out. So Peter is writing to these believers to help encourage them, to bring an understanding of how they should have their faith in God. And he reminds them, even though they're being persecuted for their relationship with Jesus, he's reminding them that though they live in this world, they are not belonging to it. So this morning, we're going to understand what it means to be a citizen of heaven, because Peter is going to help us understand what that means, because he's writing to these believers and telling them, hey, you are a citizen of heaven. So this morning, we're asking the question, it's going to be on the screen. What does it mean to be a citizen of heaven? What does it mean to be a citizen of heaven? So let's open up the Bibles, 1 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 9. We're just going through 2 verses this morning. I'm going to unpack it, and I'll give you guys 3 points to remember. So, verse 9. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. So we're going to pause right there real quickly. But what Peter is telling these believers, these followers of Jesus, these Christians, he's telling them a couple things. That you are a chosen people. God chose you. That you are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. And then he makes the main point here. It says that you are God's special possession. And for these Christians hearing this is powerful because they're being persecuted. They're being almost killed for their belief in Jesus. And what Peter is saying, hey, you don't belong to this world. You may live here, but you don't belong to it. And like I said a few weeks ago when we started this series, is that there's a couple things that I've learned in my time with middle schoolers and even high schoolers, and I would say even adults ask these questions, is that, hey, who am I? Where do I belong? And what's my purpose? And looking at here is that Peter's telling them the same thing, is that, hey, your purpose, your belonging is not here. Even though you live here, like in Chatsworth, Simi Valley, wherever, like you don't belong here. You're God's special possession. And this can all be summarized with this powerful phrase that we're learning this morning, that they are citizens of heaven. Citizens of heaven. So we're asking the question, what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven? Here is your first fill-in. All right, so here it is. Being a citizen of heaven means that you are chosen. Being a citizen of heaven means that you are chosen. And let's unpack this a little bit. All right, so it says that God chose them. And even though this wasn't specifically written to us, the same truth remains for wildlife today in 2022. That God chose you. He chose you for something epic. And if you've ever been chosen for something, whether it's chosen to be invited to a party, chosen, like if you're ever in elementary school, chosen to be on like a certain kickball team or dodgeball, like pair or whatever, you guys ever done that? Or like a baseball team, you ever been chosen? There's something in us that gets really excited about that, right? When someone's like, hey, I want you to do this, or I want you to be a part of this, it kind of stirs something in us, like, oh, me? Okay. And for example, I think when we're chosen, we get a lot of emotions going. And I want to kind of illustrate this is that you guys know the Avengers, right? You guys see the Avengers? Let's pull that photo on the screen. But these are like the old school Avengers, let's be honest, not Phase 4, not with Doctor Strange. But these Avengers, all of them were chosen because of their set of skills, right? We have Captain America, he's athletic. We have Iron Man, he's part robot. We have Hulk, who has an anger issue. We have Hawkeye, who's, let's be honest, useless. Thor, who is, having a good hair day. And then Black Widow, who can, like, just speak up on you and, like, take all your secrets or whatever. All these people were chosen because there was something special about them. They were chosen for their set of skills. And in our context, in our story, all of us, like we learned last week, all of us, we learned that we were dead in our sins. That before God chose you, before you accepted Jesus into your life, whether at a camp or something, you can go ahead and take that photo off the screen for me. We were all dead in our sins because we were rebelling from God, if you remember from last week. Yet God chose you and me to be part of something epic, be part of an epic people group known as the church. That the church is not a place with 4 walls, or in this room it's like a weird wall and a wall and it's like 8 walls. But the church is not a building. The church is a people group. It's that Wildlife is church. Rocky Peak, all the people that go here are the church. And yet God chose you and me, despite our flaws, which I have a lot, I'm sure you have a lot as well. He chose us to be part of his church. And this is good news, because we don't have to prove ourselves. We don't have to convince God and be like, God, I'm a pretty good person. I think you should let me in. No, God chose us because what Jesus has done is that through God's grace, which we hear last week, you remember that grace is unearned favor of God, but through Jesus, God gives us his grace. Is that even though our flaws, God, through his grace, chose us to be part of something epic, to be part of his church. So that's our first film. The second film is this. Being a citizen of heaven means that you are royalty. Right? You don't get a crown. Sorry. Not yet. But being a citizen of heaven means that you are royalty. It's not like Oprah. It's like, you got a crown, you got a crown. No, you get to sit there, listen. But being a citizen of heaven means that you are royalty. It's that if you've said yes to Jesus, which means you've accepted Jesus into your heart to say, hey, Jesus, I want to follow you everywhere I go. Whether it's here at Rocky Peak, whether it's at school, whether it's at home. When you said yes to Jesus, you said, Jesus, I want to be part of this epic thing that you've planned. And that means that you are a son or a daughter of King Jesus. Is that because of a king, that means we belong to royalty, which is pretty epic and pretty cool, right? Is that God's kingdom, where he dwells, is heaven, is his kingdom. Is that his kingdom is in heaven. Is that Jesus said that he's bringing God's kingdom here to earth. And that when followers of Jesus come together as the church, there's a glimpse of heaven. That God's kingdom is holy because God is there. We're going to understand more of what that means. God's kingdom is holy because God is there, which means anyone God calls into his family, his church, means they are called to holiness as well, which leads into our third fill-in. Is that being a citizen of heaven means that you are called to be holy. And we're going to understand more of what that means, because I think a lot of us, when we hear the word holy, we think of like perfection. We think that you can never fail. Like you can never fail a test. You can never fail at life. You can never fail. But that's really not what holy means. I actually looked it up. I don't have it here, but I looked it up on like Webster's dictionary, which is always fun to do. And I looked up what it means to be holy, and essentially what it was talking about is like being perfect, to be just perfection. And that's not what the Bible teaches really as being holy. It's kind of a part of that, maybe, but that's not really what holy means. But again, being a citizen of heaven means that you are called to be holy. And what holy means, and I would encourage you to write this down in your note sheet, what holy means is to be set apart. To be set apart. Holy means to be set apart. Another way of saying that is to be different. Now, what I mean by that, we'll talk about in a little bit, but what I truly mean is that to be holy means to not live and act like culture, but to reflect Jesus. That's what it means to be holy. To not live like other people in this world, other people at school, in your homeroom, on a sports team, that aren't followers of Jesus. Being holy means that you don't live and act like those that don't love Jesus. It means you reflect Jesus in how you live your life. It says this in Romans 12:2. It's on your note sheet. I'll read it off of that. It says this, Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So what I want to do real quick, I just want to look at those three words. Do not conform. Do not conform. Like, every time I think of the word conform, I always think of Jell-O. You guys ever, like, eat Jell-O before? You can pull that up on the screen for me. Like, Jell-O. You guys ever eat Jell-O before? Yeah? Has anyone not had Jell-O before? You gotta do a wildlife game with Jell-O. But Jell-O is something that's, gonna be honest, a little gross, but yeah, Jell-O is a weird type of food because you can eat it with a spoon, you can eat it with a straw, you can do so many things with Jell-O. And I feel like there's always like someone like grandma that makes Jell-O and then they put fruit in it and then they like make like a weird Jell-O sculpture of some sort. But if you guys don't know Jell-O, if you put it in like a mold, like a box or something, it will conform to whatever the mold is. And when I think immediately of do not conform, I think of Jell-O, because Jell-O conforms to whatever it is set into. And in the same way, what Paul is saying in Romans right here, Paul is saying, hey, do not conform to the patterns of this world. Another way of saying that, hey, don't be like the people that aren't followers of Jesus. Don't act like them. Don't be like them. Because they are not living the way Jesus calls us to live. That we are called to be different from those that are not within the church. Now, what I want to clarify here is that living a holy life, again, holy is to be set apart, to be different than everyone else that aren't followers of Jesus. To live a holy life does not mean you get everything right. It doesn't mean you are perfect all the time. It doesn't mean you get everything correct. That's not what it means to be holy. Being holy also doesn't even mean that you think you're better than everyone else, or you even act like you're better than everyone else. That's where pride and ego and all this terrible stuff comes into, is that being holy means you reflect Jesus in how you treat everyone around you. You reflect Jesus with how you treat everyone around you. Jesus calls us to be kind to one another. That means we are kind to those that aren't kind to us. Doesn't mean we start bashing on them. Doesn't mean we start giving them gossip. Again, we don't live like the world, but we're in the world, but we don't belong to it. So we don't want to act like the world. People at your school. All right, so back to 1 Peter, one verse, 1 Peter 9:10. Hopefully you're still there. Verse 10 says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Once you were not a people. What I want us to understand is that because of what Jesus has done on the cross, that he lived a perfect life, a holy life that was pleasing to God, because of what he's done, he's calling us to something epic. Because before Jesus came into your life, you were not a people, is what Peter said. You weren't anybody. You were living in your sin and your rebellion against God. But what Jesus has done is that because he is calling you to now be a people, he says, now you are the people of God. Because what Jesus did on the cross, you were no longer lost. You were no longer wandering around, but now you have a new identity in Jesus. That your identity is not in the things you have, it's not the things you do, but your identity is because what Jesus has already done for you. You guys don't remember anything. Remember this one thing, is that you are a citizen of heaven because what Jesus has already done. So, with the time we have left, I want to give you guys a quick action step. Now, this action step might be a little off. It might be a little thing kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But this morning we've been talking about what it means to be a citizen of heaven. We've learned that means that you're chosen, means that you are royalty because of God. He is a king. Jesus is king. That means you are there to be holy. And so the question is, how can we do that? How can we live a holy life, which means to reflect Jesus? How can we do that? So here's an action step. Like I said last week, every week we have an action step. What that means is that for us to then leave wildlife, because you can't stay here, for us to leave wildlife, there's something I want you guys to do as wildlife, as church. This is what I want you guys to do, and I'll unpack it a little bit. Is that here's the action step. Listen to and obey your parents. Listen to and obey your parents. Now you might hear that and go, what? What does that have to do with being chosen, being royalty, being a holy people? What does that mean to be set apart by listening to and obeying my parents? Now you might also be that person out there like, oh, I don't live with my parents, or I just live with my mom, I just live with my dad, or I live with my aunt and uncle, whoever you live with. This applies to you as well, that we are to listen and obey your parents. And the reason for that is that as I've seen what's going on social media, whether it's in movies, currently, there is this uproar, what I'm calling this disobedience to authority, to the people in your life that are leading you, guiding you, parenting you. And for us to reflect Jesus, we need to live and act differently than everyone else. The Bible actually talks a lot about that we are to honor our father and mother. It's actually one of the 10 commandments. Did you know there's like over 600 commandments? Isn't that crazy? But we are to honor our father and mother, to be your aunt, uncle, whoever it is. We are to honor them, respect them, listen to them, and obey them. For example, a couple of ways this can look is that don't talk back to your parents. Whether your parents are I know a lot of you are like, it's just something, they don't get it. But don't talk back to your parents. Your parents tell you to do something, do it. Not because you agree with them. Not because maybe you are like, oh, yes, whatever you want, parents. No, because God, Jesus, tells us, hey, honor your father and mother. Reflect Jesus' character. You guys knew Jesus had parents. Remember Joseph and Mary? I bet Jesus, I bet he got grounded, maybe. I don't know. And then they were probably like, oh, actually, you're the son of God. You actually can't do anything wrong. But Jesus lived a life where he honored his parents. He was listening to and obeying what they wanted. So don't talk back to them. Another way is like, hey, be kind to your parents. Be kind to your parents. Another example, as the band comes out, is that, hey, this morning, you learned a lot about what it means to be holy, to be set apart. Another way you can listen and obey your parents is that you can just share one thing you learned this morning. Because I know I was like you in middle school. You learn something, you kind of learn something, you hear something kind of cool, and you walk out those doors, and it's gone. All of you are like, every day, dude, I don't know what you're saying every Sunday. But I can guarantee you've had one parent kind of go, hey, what'd you learn at church today? And you've gone, I don't know. Anyone do that? Anyone like that do a good impression of you? That how you guys talk? Cool. Your voice just drops. But your parents probably ask you, like, hey, what did you learn at church today in wildlife? And you go, I don't know. Or, leave me alone. All your parents are doing is they're just asking you because they want to have a better understanding of what's going on in your life because they care about you. Now, you might hear that go, no, they don't. But I guarantee you, yeah, they do. So I want to challenge you this morning when your parent or whoever asks you, hey, what did you learn at wildlife today? Or how was wildlife? Just tell them one thing that you thought was cool. Or one thing that you thought was interesting. Or something you found out. Of like, oh, well, actually this morning I learned that holy actually doesn't need to be perfect all the time. To be holy means that you are to be set apart. You are to be different than everyone else that is not within the church. We're supposed to reflect Jesus in how we treat other people. Do you tell your parents that? I know that was like a paragraph, but if you tell them that, they're going to be like, whoa, that's awesome. If you have a hard time remembering, you're going to share something on that note sheet we talked about. But we're going to go right now into our last song of this morning. And what I want you guys to do is I want you just to think about your life. Think about, are you living a life that is set apart and is living to reflect Jesus, kind of like a mirror? When people see you, do they go, oh, are you a follower of Jesus? Are you a Christian? And a Christian doesn't mean you get everything right. It means that you follow Jesus. So I'm going to invite you guys to stand up, and as we go into this last song this morning, I want you guys just to reflect on that. Are you living a life that is set apart than everyone else? So I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then we'll go into this last song, all right? Jesus, thank you so much that you've called us, that you chose us by name to be part of something epic. That because you are king and we are part of your church, we are considered royalty. That means that we are to live a holy life, to be set apart. So would you help us, Jesus? Would you help us as wildlife? Would you help us understand what that means in our own life? Maybe it truly means listening to and obeying our parents, not talking back to them, not giving them sarcasm, not giving them a hard time, but truly listening to them and obeying what they ask the first time. So we love you. We thank you. It's in your name. Amen.